Have you ever been surrounded by people and still felt alone? Not physically alone, not socially alone, something quieter than that. Like everyone else received a map, and you're trying to navigate with questions. If you've ever felt that way, this video is for you. Most people think loneliness comes from being isolated, not having enough friends, not having enough relationships, not having enough social interaction, and sometimes that's true. But there is another kind of loneliness, one that can exist in a crowded room, one that often affects people who spend a lot of time thinking, reflecting, questioning, observing. People who notice patterns, people who replay conversations, people who wonder why people behave the way they do. People who spend more time inside their minds than they admit. And at first, that can feel like a strength. But every strength has a cost. The hidden cost of deep thinking is that it changes where your attention naturally goes. Small talk becomes harder. Surface-level conversations feel less satisfying. Not because you're arrogant, not because you're better than anyone else, but because your brain has become accustomed to searching for depth. You don't stop wanting connection. You start wanting a different kind of connection, one that feels genuine, one that goes beyond updates and opinions, one that explores ideas, meaning, identity, fear, growth, the things people often think about, but rarely talk about. And that's where the problem begins, because the deeper the connection you're hoping for, the rarer it becomes. Here's the hidden mechanism. Human beings connect through similarity, shared experiences, shared interests, shared beliefs, shared ways of seeing the world. But people who spend a lot of time analyzing life often develop perspectives that are less common. Not better, not more important, just less common. The more unusual your perspective becomes, the fewer people immediately relate to it. The result isn't superiority, it's separation. Not because you're above people, but because you're speaking a slightly different psychological language. Imagine walking into a room where everyone is discussing the weather, while you're thinking about purpose, identity, regret, change. Nothing is wrong with either conversation. They're simply happening at different depths, and when that happens often enough, you begin feeling disconnected, even when people are around. But there's another layer, and this is the part many people never realize. The more deeply you think, the more aware you become of how difficult it is to be fully understood. You notice misunderstandings, oversimplifications, assumptions. You become aware of the gap between what you're trying to say and what other people actually hear. And once you notice that gap, it's hard to stop seeing it. This creates 3 traps. The first is the observation trap. You spend so much time understanding other people that you stop feeling understood yourself. The second is the self-protection trap. After enough disappointing conversations, you start sharing less. Not because you don't care, because you stop expecting people to understand, so you keep more and more of yourself private, and every layer you hide makes connection harder. The third is the complexity trap. You assume your thoughts are too difficult to explain, too nuanced, too complicated. So instead of trying, you stay silent. And what starts as caution slowly becomes isolation. But here's the part most people miss. The goal isn't finding people exactly like you. The goal is finding people willing to understand you. Those are not the same thing. Because connection doesn't come from identical minds. It comes from curiosity, attention, and effort. The people who feel most alone often believe they need perfect understanding, someone who thinks exactly like them, someone who sees the world exactly the same way. But real connection usually begins long before that. It begins when someone genuinely tries, when someone listens, when someone asks one more question, when someone stays curious instead of rushing to conclusions. And maybe that's the shift. Maybe loneliness isn't always a sign that nobody understands you. Maybe sometimes it's a sign that you've been searching for perfect understanding, when meaningful understanding would have been enough. So, if you've felt disconnected lately, it doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're broken, and it doesn't mean you'll always feel this way. Maybe you've simply been searching for depth in places designed for speed. Because the hidden mechanism isn't intelligence, it's mismatch. A mismatch between the conversations you're having and the conversations you're craving. And once you understand that, the loneliness starts making a lot more sense. Have you ever felt alone in a room full of people? Tell me one moment when you felt that way. I'll read them. I'll see you in the next one.